Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, for us Michigan fans, been a roller coaster of a ride to start the 2024 season. Not only a change at quarterback, but you can kind of tell this Michigan program is, for lack of better terms, trying to find their identity with Sherrone Moore taking over. Want to take a look back at what we saw in the month of September, check in with the Michigan stock market, talk about some risers, talk about some fallers, and like when we say fallers, like we're not kind of out on these guys. We just want to see a little bit more from them going into the month of October. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, one to the Michigan fans, let it fly in the comment section, right? There's been a lot of names that have either kind of surprisingly played some really good football. There's been some names that we want to see more from as well. We can't cover all the names in a 20-minute episode. So would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, when we start with risers, like obviously the names like Mason Graham, Will Johnson come to mind. Are there any other names before we get into some of the players that might not get a ton of national media attention that you want to shout out before we get into signing kind of some diamonds in the rough, if you will, on this Michigan roster?
And I don't think Josiah Stewart is a diamond in the rough.
Love it.
He's playing at like a first round draft pick level. And I kind of we were not hoping. I mean, we knew he was going to come in and have a good year. He's way surpassed any of my wildest expectations. I mean, how dominant he's been against teams like USC in those big games that Michigan needs him in. He's played really, really well. I can't say enough about what he's done.
I'd throw Derek Moore in there too. Like Josiah Stewart's probably been more impressive, but Derek Moore on the other side for a kid that's only in his third year of college football, like that edge rusher position. You look at the starting four for this Michigan defensive line. I don't think there's a better starting four in the country.
And there was really no room for the interior guys to rise. I mean, we were so high on them. They were going to be hammers. They've been really, really good. Kenny Grant's played, I feel like, dominant football compared to even what he was doing last year. But I look at the edge guys, they've really pleasantly surprised on the upside, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm not much of a stock market guy, but like Mason Graham's just like Apple. Just staying up there, ain't moving. Dill, I think one other guy I'll shout out, Claude Mullings. And like the Michigan fans who've been rocking with the boys for a while know he was kind of my guy all off season long. Quite frankly, like was really good for Michigan in 2023. Just didn't get a ton of attention or work because of Blake Corum as a bell cow workhorse back. I think he fits this Michigan offense perfectly. Now, getting into some names that weren't on a ton of people's radar heading into 2024 that I think have been really good. I think you got to start with TJ Guy. We talk about one of the biggest question marks we had for Michigan's defense was the depth on the defensive line, right? We knew we had Josiah Stewart. We knew we had Derek Moore, but there wasn't a ton of proven production outside of those two. We know Michigan wants to rotate the defensive line pretty consistently. We were looking for guys to step up on the edge. Like TJ Guy, and you heard the rumors, like in spring and fall camp, like, hey, TJ Guy is looking really good. Dill, 7 quarterback hurries, a 21.5% pass rush win rate. Had to play a lot of football when Josiah Stewart wasn't playing against Minnesota.
When he got his shot to be the guy, he was a monster. That was one big thing I thought.
100%. And like, that's kind of what we need. And again, Josiah Stewart's going to be healthy for this Washington game, but in the 15 to 20 snaps that TJ Guy is going to be on the football field for, he's going to be a game wrecker. He's going to be a contributor for this Michigan defense. I mean, he's probably a starter on 85% of teams across the country. He's our kind of third guy coming off the edge. I think that's a great spot for Michigan to be in. Dill, the second guy we got to shout out, redshirt freshman Jair Hill. He's been just absolutely elite. Now, again, another big question mark for this Michigan defense was, all right, we know Will Johnson's a guy on that one side. Who's going to be that cornerback too? Like my pick was Amir Hall. Like Amir's been good. Jair Hill's just been better. And then when Will Johnson is not playing against Minnesota, we have 2 really quality boundary cornerbacks that are playing at a high level. What stands out to me about Jair Hill is we knew the physical traits were there, right? He's 6'2", 180, has a sub 1100 coming out of high school, like size, long speed, but the ball skills and the polish, the development. I mean, he looks like a cornerback that's going into his 5th year as a starter, even though he's only a second-year college football player. That's relatively new in terms of playing time for this Michigan defense.
And also legitimately physical tackler, and that's something I think can be like underrated in what Michigan's trying to do. I think it's what made them arguably the best defensive unit in college football in 2023 is they just never missed tackles. You see that Washington game, They tackle guys when they get on them. I mean, Jair Hill's doing that. The physicality, the plays he was making in that USC game, obviously the ball skills, the highlight plays, but his ability to tackle at a really high level, I think, again, complementing what he does in the pass game, I think that's made him a much more complete corner, and I think we thought we were going to get this year.
In Michigan hasn't tackled as well as I think we're used to. I mean, in 2023, like Dale, that defense I think was even more
Nobody will
special.
tackle better than that defense.
Yeah, like it couldn't get much better than what it was last year. Like it's still pretty damn good for Michigan in 2024, but probably has taken a step back. Dill, let's go to the linebacker position and let's talk about arguably what I think has been maybe the most impressive linebacker we've seen on this Michigan defense, and Jimmy Rolder, who kind of a wild ride for Jimmy, played a lot as a freshman, redshirted as a second-year kid, now coming back, kind of that third linebacker in the rotation. Dill, he's making a case for extended playing time for this Michigan defense. And we can kind of we can talk about Jayshon Barham in this light as well. Maybe like Jayshon Barham's been solid. Like he's been very, very solid for Michigan. And I blame the Michigan beat writers for this still. I blame them. Like when I heard in the fall camp that he was just a more athletic version of Devin Bush, like I think they inflated my expectations a little bit because a more athletic Devin Bush is the best linebacker in the country. Jayshon Barham's been good. I don't know if he's been that good. Jimmy Rolder, I think, has been very good for Michigan to start 2024.
And that was a huge one because I think you knew at the top like him or Hausman and Barham were going to be solid players, and they've been solid. I thought Ernest Hausman played his best game by far against Minnesota, so I'm hoping to see that continue. I thought he made better plays, he was in the right spot a little bit more. But you're right, Jimmy Rolder, when he's got a shot, I feel like he just looks a little bit more athletic, a little bit more explosive, is making plays behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, things that he just wasn't doing last year. And you saw when he came in more of a spot duty, like that Ohio State game. I'm like, whoa, what are we going to do with Jimmy Rolder at some point? And now he's playing like he legitimately belongs at this level and is playing really
And
good.
another, like, again, I think some of the storylines for Michigan has been like the depth of this Michigan defense has, I think, been very impressive. And again, are the numbers as good as they were in 2023? No. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, new defensive coordinator. I think more importantly, like the Michigan offense just hasn't been great. They're not staying on the football field consistently, so it puts a little bit more strain on the defense. That being said, I do think this Michigan defense is probably better than the numbers are necessarily saying. The last riser I want to talk about, and it's kind of a segue into a faller here. Let's talk about Andrew Gentry. Dill, he hasn't played a ton, right? He's kind of just that sixth man that comes in some of those heavy sets. When he plays, he dominates. And it's kind of similar to the conversation we had last year with Miles Hinton, when it's like when I saw Miles Hinton, I always thought he might have been the best tackle on this Michigan team last year. When I see Andrew Gentry, I'm not necessarily saying he's the best tackle, but he looks like a guy that could be playing for Michigan in 2024.
And I really got to think that battle for the right tackle spot is still kind of being waged on some level because I think you kind of look. Evan Link hasn't looked incredible, and if Michigan's going to play the style they're playing, Andrew Gentry's really built to do that. Because again, I mean, he's probably not the athlete that Evan Link is, but he's moving guys off the ball at a really high level, and they bring him in on that sixth lineman.
He's a hammer. And I'm kind of with you in terms of, all right, let's look at how we want this Michigan offense to operate. We want to smash. That's what Sherrone Moore wants to do. Andrew Gentry's the tackle that smashes. Getting into Evan Link, again, I'm not trying to drag Evan Link, but can Andrew Gentry not really play right tackle? Because I know he's primarily kind of played left tackle when he's played in spot duty. I don't know the answer to that. I think he can play right tackle because I think I've seen him play right tackle. Dill, Evan Link, not quite as physical in the run game, which we kind of knew, right? Andrew Gentry is just a monster, knows how to move people off the ball, but even in pass protection. Now, granted, Evan Link is a redshirt freshman that hasn't played a ton of football, that I think has a very, very high upside, but even in pass protection, I mean, 16 quarterback pressures on only 129 pass blocking snaps. Go back to that Texas game, go back to times in that USC game. I wouldn't be surprised if Sherrone Moore's like, hey, I really like Evan Lincoln. I know the ceiling's high, so we're going to continue to ride with him and just let him get better. But as of right now, if you were to ask me who's been more impressive in their sample size, I would point to Andrew Gentry.
No, and I would too. And it more comes down to like that pass pro just hasn't been what I think you'd expect it to be with a
Yes,
guy who's built the way he's
that's
built.
kind of what you thought he'd be good at.
Really good athlete, really long, really lean, like kind of things you want to see from elite pass protecting tackles. And yeah, Michigan's going to throw the ball 15 to 20 times a game, which is kind of what I expect. And probably 10 or 5 to 10 of them are going to be things like sprint outs and some other stuff where it's not traditional pass pro sets. I'm really surprised Andrew Gentry's not one of the tackles because I just think, again, his ceiling as a run blocker is about as high as you kind of want it.
That's kind of where I'm at too, and we'll see if we get any changes. I wouldn't mind seeing Michigan go back to some more 6-man sets. Like we've talked about Michigan. All right, we're gonna run the football 70+% of our offensive snaps. We got to make sure we're being creative in terms of how we run it. Like that's something I would like to see Michigan go back to because I think it has worked for Michigan when they've gone there. Last faller I want to talk about, and I don't know how much it's fair to blame a wide receiver like Tyler Morris. He kind of all the offseason buzz was pointing towards Tyler Morris being that true wide receiver one. And again, the Michigan offense is not really pushing the ball down the field. That being said, Dill, when Tyler Morris has gotten his opportunities, 13 targets, only 6 catches, a 46% completion percentage when he's been targeted for only 43 yards. So he's averaging less than 6 or less than 7 yards per catch. I think Tyler Morris can play, and I would like to see a little bit more emphasis on maybe getting him the ball in some creative ways. But throughout the first 5 games, it hasn't been great for Tyler Morris.
And he is a tough one to evaluate. And I
Yeah,
think, frankly, all the wide receivers are just because
agreed.
of the lack of steadiness you've gotten at quarterback. But I think that, like, again, some of those plays, you think back to that play against Fresno State, like that should have been a touchdown. I mean, I just don't know why he couldn't track the ball. I don't know totally what happened. But when you go back, watch that again, that's a play that I think you'd really like to see him come down with. And also just like being more open. I feel like you haven't seen enough
That's
like, openness from Michigan wide receivers in general.
that's why I was kind of banging the table for Alex Orji. And I know some Michigan fans didn't agree with it. And that's kind of the beauty of the sport we love talking about. But you look at the offense, it's like the wide receiver, it's not a very good wide receiver room. Like there's not a lot of wide receivers that are creating a lot of separation. So even if Davis Warren was better than he showed as a thrower, as a pocket passer, I'm not sure how successful this Michigan offense would have been because, again, outside of Colson Loveland, there's not really many pass catching options that are striking fear into the opposing defense. I think you thought Tyler Morris could have been the guy. He hasn't really been that guy so far. I will give him credit. I do think he blocks his tail off down the field, which, quite frankly, is probably going to be the most important role for him going forward. You want to see more from the pass catchers. But we'll see. And Dill, I will say this: like Alex Orji did make, I think,
He
made
made some
sense.
throws that'll excite you if you're a Michigan fan.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously the bar is pretty low because he also made some throws that made me throw up in my mouth a little bit. But he made some like again those that out route to Colson Loveland. Like that's the type of play that if he just makes that relatively consistently, I think Michigan can be pretty dangerous.
or that dig route to Kenny Bell.
Yeah,
There's been some flashes there for Alex Orji. Now you just got to be a little bit more consistent about it. And I'm kind of interested to see what the run pass split looks like going on the road against Washington Saturday night.
I'm watching these Michigan regular season games again. It wasn't like this last year. You just
Well,
like on pins and needles, like, oh, don't lose, because we should win a national championship. Now there's like, yeah, it's exciting. I mean, there is like almost that added benefit of you don't know what you're totally gonna get.
Well, I don't know if that's an added benefit because I kind of said this. Like
I love
the tough part on the Michigan fans is like last year you'd host Minnesota and be like, all right, we can have another game on the side. We can strike up a cat. You could even go out and have like a watch party with your buddies. Now it's like you got to be focused. Like every game for Michigan is going to be a battle. And again, Michigan's gotten very good at winning ugly football games. That being said, like you kind of know as a Michigan fan, you're going into battle every single Saturday
love it.
with this Michigan team. You like it. I get a little stressed out, more stressed than I should, but that can't change that. Dill, we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.